In this video, we're going to take a look at one of the most common and most important audio signal processing tools, compression. Compression can be kind of a hard thing for a beginning producer to understand and to hear, but the more you practice with a compressor and the more you try things out, the better you'll get at using this critical tool. Let's check out this drum track from the session from last week's module. I'm going to solo it and listen to it. Okay, so if we take a close look at it, you'll see that there are spikes in the waveforms every time there's a drum hit. Those spikes are called transients. Then the body of each note trails off quickly. In between, we have these smaller drum hits from the drum kit. And what we want to do is raise the overall level of this signal in order to make it stick out in the mix more. If we just turn the volume up with the fader, we will have a louder signal, but these transient spikes will be too loud and they might start clipping or they might just sound too loud. Instead, we want to take advantage of the way our ears and brains process audio. We don't hear peak levels in audio from moment to moment in general. Instead, we perceive the overall level of an entire audio signal over time. So if we can raise the quieter parts of the signal up without raising the volume level of the transients, then the entire track will sound louder to us without being significantly louder on the meter. That's exactly what a compressor does. In my inserts, after EQ37 band, I'm going to go to multi-channel plugin and I'm going to go to the dynamics category. I'm going to choose the Dyne3 compressor limiter. Make sure you don't get the de-esser or the expander gate by accident because they all say Dyne3. Choose the compressor limiter. On the Dyne3 compressor limiter, we have meters showing the signal level going in and coming out of the plugin. We have a gain reduction meter that you'll see in action in a moment. We have a graph of compression right here. We have sidechain controls that we will not use for this video. And then at the bottom, we have these 6 primary controls. The first control we want to look at is the threshold. The threshold indicates at what volume level the compressor starts working. If sound is below the threshold, it will not be compressed. If sound is above the threshold, it will be compressed and its volume will be lowered. So the first stage of compression is to lower the volume but of just the loud parts of a signal. Let's experiment with the threshold. You can see that some parts of the signal are going over the threshold. If I make the threshold very low, now the entire signal is being compressed. You can see the gain reduction meter jumping down like crazy, almost negative 30 decibels. So we're losing almost 30 decibels here. And you can hear that the entire signal is super quiet. On the other hand, if I raise the threshold very high, now you can hear the entire signal as if it were normal and there is no gain reduction. Nothing is being compressed. What we want to do is set the threshold so that we get between 3 and 6 decibels of gain reduction overall in the signal. Let's try that. Now you can see that when those larger transients hit, we're getting between 3 and 6 decibels of gain reduction. You can see it on the graph here as well. That's a good start. We also want to keep in mind the ratio of compression. So the ratio is the strength of compression. Once the sound goes above the threshold and is compressed, how much is it compressed? This is a 3-to-1 ratio, meaning that if the sound exceeds the threshold by 9 decibels, it will come out only exceeding it 3 decibels. This ratio cuts it down by 3-to-1. On the other hand, if it were a 10-to-1 ratio and the decibel level exceeded the threshold by, let's say, 10 decibels, it would come out only 1 decibel louder because of the 10-to-1 ratio. The bigger the ratio, the stronger the compression. This compressor goes up to 100-to-1. Once you pass 20-to-1, or some people even say 10-to-1, you go from compression into the realm of limiting, and we'll talk about limiting in a later video. For now, I'm going to set this back at 3-to-1 because that's a pretty good starting ratio. I also need to pay attention to the attack and release times. These describe how fast the compressor reacts and lets go to sound above and below the threshold. So basically, how fast the compressor works. Since I'm on a drum track and the notes are super quick and the transients are super short, I'm going to make this faster. This looks like a little U. It's actually the Greek letter micron in a weird font. So this is a microsecond, 87 microseconds, and the release time is in milliseconds. Microseconds are much shorter than milliseconds. So I'm going to give this kind of a fast attack time and a short release time. And you can see that we are achieving much more compression, too much. So I'm going to raise the threshold. So I once again get between 3 and 6 decibels of gain reduction. We have successfully completed the first stage of compression, the squashing part. We are taking the loudest parts of the drum signal and we are lowering the volume level. So now the whole thing sounds quieter. Now we move to the stage 2, the makeup gain stage. This red gain knob here is a makeup gain knob. We're going to look at the amount of gain reduction we're getting in the meter and then reverse it with the makeup gain. So right now, we're getting about 4.5 or 5 decibels of gain reduction most of the time. So I'm going to go into my makeup gain knob and type 5. Now the entire signal has been raised by 5 decibels. So the loudest parts are back to the same volume level they were before, but now the quieter parts are all 5 decibels louder. So in essence, what we've done is we have lowered the volume level of the loud parts and then raised the entire signal. And that has the net effect of making the entire signal sound louder because the dynamic range has been narrowed. The other control on here is the knee control. The knee controls the angle of this graph line right here, and a faster knee means that the compressor reaches full strength very quickly. If I crank this up, you can watch the slope become more curved and gentle. A more gentle knee means that the compressor takes more time to reach full strength. If you have a very musical part with a lot of harmonic content like a vocal or a bass, you may want to use a slower knee for a more musical product. If you are doing speech or you're doing something like a drum, then a harder knee can be just fine. It's up to you, but I find knee to be one of the hardest parameters of the compressor to actually hear. All right. You can tell if the compressor is working by A-Bing it with the bypass button. Let's turn the bypass on and off so we can hear what kind of a difference it's making. And I'm going to raise the volume level of the track so it's easier to hear. Here's no compression. There's compression. So when the compressor is on, you can hear these little parts louder. You can also hear that the overall sound is just kind of punchier, tighter, and a little brighter. However, if you look at the volume meter, you will not notice a big difference between when the compressor is on and off. That's because the overall volume level is about the same. We're just hearing the quieter parts more, and so it sounds louder to us. Now that might sound like a very subtle difference. You may not be able to hear it at all if you're a beginner, but trust me, it's there. When you add a little bit of compression to each track, it makes a huge difference in your mix. In the next video, we're going to take a look at some other compressor plugins.